Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a story. Not just any story. This is a therapeutic story. Therapeutic stories are designed to help people kind of speak to their unconscious, speak to their more primitive part of their brain, and help create healing. So if you've never heard a therapeutic story, check it out. Hi, I'm Brett, your favorite shrink, and welcome. Welcome to My 5 Minds. This is where you're going to learn to be better, do better, and feel better by learning how to use your whole brain as a system, what we call systemology. Today in particular, we're going to talk about and learn a therapeutic story. It's a story for your third ear, your unconscious brain. Now, before I jump in the story, I want to help prepare you. I'm going to share the story, and then when I'm done with the story, I'm just going to be done. I'm not going to explain anything. I'm not going to talk about anything. I'm not going to bring out the meaning of what this all meant. You get to do that yourself. Or not. Just let the story be in your mind. Just let the story run through your brain. And let your unconscious find the meaning that it needs. Okay? So when we're done with the story, sit quiet for a while. Sit still for a while. Allow yourself to just be with the story. So that's your homework. I know I'm giving you homework ahead of time, but when we're done, I just want to be done. And just let you sit with the story. Okay? Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Her days were just filled with surviving. She was lonely. She was alone. She was hungry and empty. She was lost and afraid. Each day, she just focused on getting through the day. Tomorrow, next week, there wasn't her focus. That didn't exist. Because she wasn't sure she was going to exist through this day. One day, she saw the baker's boy. The baker's boy was taking bread from the bakery and feeding it to the pigs. Old bread, stale bread, burnt bread, bad bread. But it was bread. It was bread all the same, and she was hungry. The baker's boy saw her standing there, and he said to her, "Hey, little bird." She froze, not knowing what to do or what to say. He said, "Would you like some bread?" Something about his voice sounded wrong, but she did. She wanted some bread. He said, "Come, let me give you some bread, but you have to give me something." She had nothing to give. She didn't know what she had. She had nothing. She didn't know what he wanted. He told her, "I want a kiss. I want a touch." She didn't like that. She didn't know what to do with that. But she knew that's all she had. So he came. He gave her a kiss. He touched her. And he gave her bread. The bread filled her stomach. But the touch and the kiss left her empty. It became a routine. It became normal. It became part of survival. Every day the boy would go and give the bread to the pigs. And he'd save a piece for her, for a kiss, for a touch. The food, the bread, filled her stomach and left her body empty. The touch warmed her skin, but left her cold. As time went on, as years went by, a time came when she said no. No more. She said to stop. And she put a stop. She found other ways, she found other means to get the bread she needed. But the experience, the touches, the kiss still left her empty and cold. Well, she grew up, and maybe it was chance, and maybe it was a chance that she took. But she married. She married a baker. Not the baker's boy, not the baker, but a sweet baker. A baker that baked sweets, cakes, pies, sweet rolls, sweet bread. And it was good. It felt good. He was sweet to her. And she grew strong, felt strong. His touch didn't feel cold. His bread didn't leave her empty, at least not at first. And then as time went by, she began to remember. She began to recall what had happened to her as a child. And as she remembered those feelings, as she allowed herself to feel what she couldn't feel as a child, the sweet bread didn't taste so sweet anymore. The touch and the kisses now felt odd, cold, and empty. And she began to feel for her husband what she felt for the boy. And it confused her. It scared her, it frightened her. She didn't know what to do with her feelings anymore. One day, she went out to the square. And there in the square was a beggar. The beggar was sitting by the fountain with an old piece of bread. Stale. Moldy. But he took his bread and he broke it. And he scattered it out to the birds. And the birds were hungry and eager to come and eat the bread. He saw her across the way and he said to her, "Come, little bird, come sit with me." She was scared. But something about him was gentle. Something about him was kind. So she went. She sat. He broke the bread and threw it to the birds. And she watched. That became kind of a routine, a pattern. Each day in the afternoon, she'd go. She'd go to the square where the old beggar was there, giving bread to the birds. And she'd sat and listened and just enjoyed the company. Well, one day, the beggar said something odd. He said, I wonder if the birds feel bad that they need my bread." She didn't know what he was saying. She didn't know what he meant. Was he telling her something? Was he saying something to her? Was he just talking out loud? She didn't know what to do. So she just sat. And he said no more. The next day, she went out and she again sat there in the square with the beggar. And this time, as the beggar was throwing bread, he said, I wonder if the farmer feels bad that he's dependent on the weather for his crops. Again, it just seemed like it was something he was just saying out loud or just saying to himself. But something about it felt it was meant for her. But she didn't know what it meant. Again, she just sat quiet. The next day, the beggar was sitting there throwing out the bread, and he said, I wonder if the miller feels bad that he's dependent on the farmer for the crops, for the wheat to grind in his mill. He just threw his bread. And again, she thought, what is he saying? What does this mean? And the beggar never said. The next day he said, I wonder if the baker feels bad that he's dependent on the miller for the flour for his bread. And just tossed the bread out to the birds. She knew there was no more coming after that because there never was. So she just sat with the words. Sat, not sure what to say or do. But she just thought. The next day it happened again. The beggar was there and feeding the birds, and he said this time, I wonder if the beggar should feel bad that he's dependent on the baker's bread to survive. All of a sudden something started to shift in her. She started to feel something. He was the beggar. And that was the bread. Should he feel bad? Should he feel bad? Should she feel bad? Something began to shift. Something began to change for her. The question stopped. He never asked more. But she began to think about the birds feeling bad for the bread, or the beggar feeling bad for the bread, or the baker feeling bad for the wheat, or the miller feeling bad for the grain, or the farmer feeling bad for the weather. She began to feel how everything is connected. We all have needs. We all need each other. If we're going to survive, we need one another. Should we feel bad? That would be sad. That's the story of the baker and the beggar. I'm Brett, your favorite shrink, and you're watching My 5 Minds. Think about it. Take care.